Good morning. Happy Father's Day to the OGs and converts. This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, oakridgeford.com. It is Sunday, June 18th, 2023. Just a few weeks until we get to the beginning of July, and a really pivotal point for all NHL teams worth their weight trying to reconfigure, get planned for the future, including your Toronto Maple Leafs. Mr. Augello, good morning. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Norm. There seems to be a lot of things moving about when it comes to the Leafs. I mean, with 10 unrestricted free agents, with a new GM, the coaching staff, still up in the air, but it's starting to look like, Sheldon Keefe is going to be back. Now it really, if that's the case, then the focus obviously switches to some of the contract situations and some of the pending unrestricted free agents that'll hit the market in, I think it's less than 2 weeks.
This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, oakridgeford.com. We've got tons of pre-owned escapes on the ground. If you're looking for a second car for the family, maybe even a first car for one of your kids, get at me at Norm at Oak Ridge Ford on Instagram. And again, lots of new inventory coming in on a daily basis, including F-150 Lariats. Yeah, they cost a lot of money, but I have a pretty amazing lease option for you that cannot be beat by anybody in the GTA, in the province, in the country, not even close. Get at me. You know how to do it. Um, you know, some of the cast of characters that we've known, loved, loathed over the past couple of years are pretty much on their way out with the Maple Leafs. Alex Kerfoot, Justin Hall, and Michael Bunting all headed to free agency. They're going to test the waters there. It doesn't look like the Leafs have any super interest in bringing them back. William Nylander may get traded over the summer. We don't know. It looks like Auston Matthews and the Maple Leafs are going to come to terms on some kind of pact. And there's just a hell of a lot going on right now for a GM who's been thrown into the fire. Um, you know, just how pivotal are the days ahead leading up to July and then beyond right now? Because let's just put it this way, Mike, for a team that's had a ton of success in the regular season, but hasn't reached the levels that the former crew, the current crew really wanted to, and certainly the fan base is yearning for. Like, how can you summarize what Brad Treliving is facing here? Am I overstating that this is just like super important in in these early stages, or do you feel like like he's got some time to let things unfold and kind of imprint his own philosophy on things? There's more time than I'm believing there is to kind of right this ship, get into a direction, and start making a progression towards better better things and you know uh put this organization in a position to achieve more than what it has already?
There's not a lot of time. There really isn't a lot of time. Now, I mean, in certain aspects, like, what we heard about Sheldon Keefe this week, that he's likely going to, he's probably going to be back. They wouldn't be including him in interviews for assistant coaches if he wasn't going to be back. But, in terms of and they probably give him a short-term extension just for, safety's sake. They don't want him going into a lame duck year, like Kyle Dubas did last year. They want to avoid that. And really, I mean, if you give him a year or two, what does that really matter? It's just money out of the MLS and the coffers, so it doesn't really matter. In terms of direction on assistant coach, I mean, I had heard something a couple weeks ago about former Leaf Kirk Muller, who was an associate coach with the Flames. Treliving knows him well, longtime assistant with Montreal and Carolina head coach for a while. Very experienced guy, very good coach. But of course, the thing that you have to be, if you're Sheldon Keefe, that you have to worry about is that sort of Treliving's guy. And if they have a long slump in the middle of the season and he decides to make a change, then Kirk Muller is probably your interim coach. So,
Wow.
But that's, I'm not saying that's likely. I'm saying that's possible. I mean,
How much awkwardness is there prevailing over what's taking place at 40 Bay right now. A new group in, remnants of the old group still about. They've got to work together. How awkward is it at this point? And it's such a pivotal period in this organization's progression forward.
Well, it was funny because Elliot Friedman addressed that a couple days ago, where apparently Treliving went to, the organization, everybody, the hierarchy, and said, if you don't feel comfortable with the changeover, now this doesn't mean that your contract's up on July 1st, you're not free to go anywhere. But if right in the here and the now, if you're not comfortable with what's going on, then you can go.
Wow.
And no, it just, but he says, basically, he was like, we want you, we need you. But if you're not comfortable with the changeover, then, I understand. And there you go.
That's amazing.
Now, okay, Michael, it's not etched in stone. I'm saying there's been rumors of it. So,
But why would Sheldon Keefe want to stick around when he's got a guy behind his back just waiting in the wings for something to go wrong? I mean, that I hope that Brad Treliving isn't, quietly or, unwittingly even sending that kind of message that, look, you guys are here temporarily unless things really work out, and anybody I bring in to support you will be the one who takes your job. I mean, professional people have worked in those circumstances in the past and will continue to do so. But man, this organization has to have cohesion, and
that's the reason. And that's the reason why I think Keefe is staying, because you've had so much changeover already. You're going to have a significant changeover, potentially close to 40% of the roster based on free agency. You've lost your captain in terms of the general manager of the team who was piloting the direction of the franchise. So do you really want to lump onto that the head coach? When he is pretty much, I know there will be people that argue, I think he has done a pretty decent job. There's been some shortcomings. People say, well, he's been outcoached. Oh, yeah, he's been outcoached by John Cooper, the best coach in the league. So, but
coach, this is competition. The Leafs, the Leafs won more than they lost, but they lost. They were outplayed. They outplayed. I mean, that's just the way she goes. I mean, and it's metastasized and exacerbated and highlighted every which way when the games become more meaningful in the playoffs. And that's what we wanted. We wanted an opportunity to do big things when it counted the most. Keefe was able to lead a team past Tampa, win the first round for a Maple Leafs team for the first time since 2004. They didn't get past Florida, and I don't really give a shit how tactical Sheldon Keefe could have ever been. The Leafs were not, and I repeat, were not beating that Florida Panthers team.
Well, not when they scored 2 goals a game, and that goes back, Norm, to the fact that your core four, and they performed against Tampa, not taking anything away from them at that point, but in the last 7 playoff games, they scored 2 goals every game, and you can't win that way. So I think that's a product of the way that the team was constructed and a product of the type of players. And how many years have I railed on that? So
the core four has elevated this organization and the group and players by association who've been a part of it. But in these days, the appearances and the perception is, and there's a potential of this core four weighing this team down more than it's elevating it. OG's Converts, what say you? Thanks so much for being here. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. Our last bit of content a few days ago, It's Coming, is the thumbnail with William Nylander on it. Almost 6,000 views on YouTube. That's really, really awesome. We appreciate it very much. Subs are up. As I've mentioned, you stick with us. We've got lots to collab over in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And it means so much that you guys are spending your Father's Day with Mr. Augello and myself. Wilfred Witzke. It will be a good season. Kerfoot and Hall gone. Good start. For sure. The Justin Hall finally out of your hair, Mike, and you'll have to find somebody else to to use as a pincushion every Sunday morning in the next season. Alex Kerfoot, admirable guy, did what he could. Just didn't have the amount of impact that you would have liked. But again, on a team full of stars, you'd expect him to slot into the hierarchy of talent. It's Michael Bunting that is a little confusing here in terms of where he's at right now.
Well,
You can't tell me that him being suspended in
no.
that series is the reason this guy's all of a sudden fallen out of favor. Mike, we could go back to like many a show where you're talking about re-signing this guy and how he's the straw that stirred the drink in terms of that little engine that could doing things, playing above his weight, punching above his weight, fighting the good fight when the guys on his line just would stand around. Now here we are. He's most likely leaving this team. What the hell happened?
Well, okay. First things first. Kerfoot, I agree. Good soldier. He was a victim of the contract that people saw $3.5 million and saw the output that he put out there and said, okay, that's bad money. Last year 51 points, or 2 years ago 51 points. Last year did not have a good year, but scored a big goal in the playoffs. He will draw interest from teams. He's a center. He can play wing. Good play. Justin Hall, please. I mean, you said he's out of my hair. I don't have any hair because of Justin Hall, because the guy was an absolute friggin' nightmare on the blue line. Somebody will pay him. Yeah, somebody will pay him. Let that sucker of a general manager pay that guy. Nice guy. I mean, nothing, not casting aspersions on his character as a guy, just simply as a hockey player. He's an atrocity on the blue line. So, now.
Bank Arena, when you're in the bowels of the operation and he walks past you with his beanie on, like, are you giving him a scowl? Are you putting your head down and pretending to not acknowledge the presence of this this unbelievable NHLer who's 2 feet away from you? Or like how does that relationship work when you encounter him
There is no relationship. I just ask questions, and I don't know, like every once in a while I'll say hi to the players, but they're players and I'm a reporter, and that's the way it is. Now Bunting,
yeah.
First of all, I think had Kyle Dubas returned, the likelihood of Bunting signing a 8-year deal for not a hometown discount, but front loaded deal, one of these deals that is more sort of a Brandon Pridham special, spread the AAV out, like the type of deal that apparently Zach Hyman turned down. I think Bunting would have taken that because he would have gotten paid, and the Leafs would have had a friendly cap hit. But the problem is that I don't know whether that appetite is there with Brad Treliving. I know, I do think the teammates love Bunting, that he provides, something that will be missing on this team if he leaves. But they can't afford. Again, it's like Hyman. They can't afford to pay him $4.5 million on a 5 or 6 year deal. I mean, they could if they traded Nylander, if they traded one of the core four, but I don't think they're going to trade one of the core four just to sign Michael Bunting. Now, I think it will suck that he leaves, because I think he's a good player, and I think the fans who turned against him when he got suspended are a bunch of friggin' morons, because he was one of the few guys on this team during the year that actually fought battles, that actually stuck up for his line mates. That was a good teammate. You ask the players on that team and they'll say he's a good teammate. So now where does he go? How much does he get? I mean, this is not a deep free agent market. And the funny thing is that some 2 or 3 of the top 5 free agents are on the Leaf roster right now. O'Reilly's going to be well sought after. Bunting is going to be well sought after. Maybe even Kerfoot, for teams that are looking for depth centers. Right. So, that's the issue. And when you have 10 unrestricted free agents and not a lot of money to sign them, Brad Treliving is going to basically have to pick and choose which ones he's going to target. And I think that the news that came out, I think it was Chris Johnston that reported that Kerfoot, Hall, and Bunting are gone. I mean, Elliot Friedman said they talked to Bunting's agent for a short time. and maybe said, if you don't get the offers that you want, maybe come back, maybe it's that type of thing. But more than likely, he's going to get paid, and it's going to be someplace else.
So would you say this is more of a money decision than a personality decision? Like, what did Kyle Dubas see in Michael Bunting that Brad Treliving is scratching his head over?
With Dubas, I don't think the personality or the quality of the player decision changed from one GM to the other. It's the Leaf organization under Dubas probably was willing to sign Bunting to an 8-year deal, to a max deal,
Right.
similar to what like Nick Paul got with Tampa, which is like 3.25 or 3.5 or something like that. The cap hit is manageable, but the term was long. I don't think Treliving wants to lock himself into an 8-year deal. And on a shorter term deal, the cap hit's going to go up. And if the cap hit's going to go up, then it doesn't make a lot of sense.
This is the Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. oakridgeford.com. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. Mike and I will be here for you. Season 6 is blending in to season 5, and I think a good 10-year run for the Convo on YouTube would be great. Mike, the question is, can the Leafs squeeze a cup or two into that time frame? Wow. So Michael Bunt, it looks like he's going to go somewhere else. The Leafs obviously haven't demonstrated to the degree of we want you with any kind of discussion they've had with Bunting and his representation. Does this lead you to believe that Brad Treliving is pretty much locked in on this core four, and that he's just, I don't know if he's not wanting to confront what's going on, but the ramifications of a trade are just too great right now? And like, where do you think his head is on the core four? You talked about Auston Matthews being re-signed, and it looks like it's coming. The question is what to what length and to what how much?
Well, let's start with that, because I think that apparently it was communicated, because Treliving went to Arizona to talk to Matthews. There's ongoing, I'm sure that there's ongoing discussion between Judd Moldaver, Matthews' agent, and Treliving on a deal. Now, it's one of these things where we probably won't find out about the deal until it just right before, like we'll get a missive from Elliott or from Pierre LeBrun or something like that, and says the Leafs are close, and then 15 minutes later it'll be announced. The question is, I don't think there's a question about whether a deal gets done. I think the question about the deal is how long the deal is, because Matthews and his representation communicated to the Leafs, or at least it's an understanding that they see like 2 more contracts with Matthews, meaning, he signs a shorter term deal here, and then at age, they say 31 or 32, he can sign another big deal, to finish off his career. Now, that means, and I think the likelihood is that the deal that he signs with Toronto is 4 or 5 years. Toronto the reports are Toronto.
What's wrong with 4 or 5 years? Is it that he'll be making even more money and after that deal is concluded or nearing the end of that 5-year run? Who knows? Maybe he regresses. Maybe he's just not a 20-year generational guy. What's wrong with a 5-year deal?
Well, and if he does regress, then the Leafs are fortunate that they're being able to get out of it when he's to age 32. But he's 26 years old, turns 27 in September. He's just entering the prime of his career. You get him on an 8-year deal, which is what they want. They're pressing for, but they may not get it. Then you have him signed to his mid-30s, to 33 or 34 years old. Okay, I mean that's the perfect scenario. That's the scenario that Nathan McKinnon agreed to. That's the scenario that a lot of players have agreed to. Now Matthews, I mean, if you can have the strength in terms of negotiating position to get a 5-year deal, then I mean, that's bully for him. I mean, that's great. I mean, now if I'm the Leafs, I'm like, okay, we'll give you the 5-year deal, but we're paying you 12.8. Like, you'll make you the highest paid player in the league, but we're not going to pay you Like, I mean, they didn't have to. I mean, he was in a good negotiating position when he signed his 5-year deal, 4 years ago. But that was one of the criticisms of Dubas, was the fact that you didn't get the term. You made him the second highest paid player in the NHL, and it was on basically a longer bridge deal. And it's like, if you're going to pay him that money, you should get him on the 8 years. Now, if you're going to make him the highest paid player in the league, okay. But if you're going to sign him for 8, then maybe it's going to have to be 13 and a half, something like that. If you're signing him for 5, then it should be the highest paid player in the league, but not like well above that, because then there's no benefit. I mean, there's a benefit in getting him locked up, but there's no benefit in terms of being able to fit other players in.
Right. And that's the problem, Mike. That's the problem. Look, the Leafs are lucky to have a guy like Auston Matthews, right? A generational talent, one of the best players in the world. And he has revitalized the franchise that was just stagnant forever. It didn't have a player of his stature, really. I mean, potentially the pound for pound, the greatest Leaf of all time. And that debate can be had. I'm just talking about what he offers and what he has brought. He's being paid for what he has done. What is he going?
Well,
the thing is, what will he do for this organization? Other than score his 40 to 60, which is fantastic. But it's a lot of money to commit to a guy who has not been the greatest in the playoffs for the last 6 years. And I mean, you can't just let a guy like that walk. You have to pay him. Who are his contemporaries? Connor McDavid and a few other guys. But we're paying him for what he's done. What the hell will he do, and who will he have on, to assist him and to augment him and to support him? Yeah. I mean, it's just like these are intriguing questions to ask. We really don't know. And in terms of length, whether it's the longest term or the shortest term, I'd like to see it get buttoned up and the team move on to other things. We're paying Auston Matthews for what he's done and what we're hoping he will do. But the question is, what will he do, and can he do with the support system he has around him, especially when money will be tight, Mike.
At his age, I disagree slightly. Is that, okay, you're paying him for what he has done, but you're also paying him for what he can do, because he's just entering his prime. He's won a Hart Trophy. And he's first, I think the first since Teeter Kennedy in the 50s.
No doubt.
Scored 60 goals, but has he carried them to the Stanley Cup? No. But he's young enough, and he's just entering the prime of his career. I mean, the argument that you're making in terms of him paying him for what he's done would be the case if he was 32 years old. It will be the case if the next deal comes up and he's signed for another 5 years, and then if they haven't won a cup, okay, what has he done? Well, and then you're having to make the decision because at that point he's going to want the 8 years, because that's basically his retirement fund. So I mean, that's a question that you ask down the line. But right now,
for the intangibles, Mike, you pay them for their production.
Sure, but I mean, he's a good guy. He's a good teammate. He's a workman-like player. He's improved defensively to the point that I think, in the next year or two, he could be in the mix for a Selke. He's one of the star players in this league. There are no reasons to sort of like doubt the fact that, barring, knock on wood, barring injury, that Auston Matthews is not going to continue on where he's going with this team. It's
durable too. I mean, he's been durable. Yeah. And that's a good thing. And again, look, you've got the class of the league at your fingertips. You have an opportunity to extend him, a longer contract, keep the relationship going. I'm not saying that they shouldn't make him happy and stabilize the franchise with a generational player. It's not like we're coming off a peak moment where we're all feeling like we want to give everybody a lot of money and have everybody back. And these times are, super comfortable, and we can't wait to see these guys again. This is, despite getting through the first round, the way the second round ended, and some of these relationships falling apart, and then having Kyle Dubas and the Leafs part ways. Again, you can understand what the a bit of trepidation, hesitation, concern as we kind of push on forward. They're the no-brainers, and they are no-brainers wrapped in caution and criticism. So, Brad Treliving does not have it's not like these are the easiest times to jump into an organization when you're trying to further its progress, advance the progress, while there are, little bits of regression, happening all over the place when it comes to personnel and staff not being there and philosophy changing and stuff like that. I'm seeing Luke Schenn's name come up with, the caption, not close. What does that mean?
Well, I think there's a little bit of negotiating here using the media, because the reports, and I'm not disputing the sources, because Rick Dollawall, who's a really good reporter in Vancouver, I'm sure he's either connected to Schenn's representatives or Schenn, because Schenn has been in Vancouver a couple times. But it came out earlier in the week that the Leafs and Schenn were talking about a multi-year deal. Now you got to remember, he's 33 years old. The last few years, he's sort of hopped around Tampa, Vancouver, a few other places. He's not made a ton of money since that deal that the Leafs signed him to, or it may have been Philadelphia that signed it to him when the Van Riemsdyk deal happened in 2012. But he hasn't made a ton of money. So seizing on a good playoff with the Leafs, this is his last opportunity to make decent money and have a little bit of protection in terms of no trade, at least a limitation, because he's moved around a lot, and that's understandable. Where I think there may be a not close situation is if he's asking for $2 million, because he made $850,000 last year.
Right.
Do they see a value in him? Yes. Would they give him a raise? Yes. Would they give him no trade protection? Probably. Treliving likes the type of, and Treliving, his teams in Calgary have been bigger and more physical, so he fits what they probably want to keep around. I think this is negotiating. I think this is
around a little bit.
Yeah, I think it'll get done. I think it will. But he has options if the Leafs stick to, like, we're not going to give you more than $900,000, and he's going to go to market and he'll find somebody who will pay him more. But I think they need to bring him back. I think he's valuable. He represents the type of player that they have too few of, and that's why, I think they'll eventually get it done. The other free agents that nobody's talking about, I think that they're gonna try on Noel Acciari, but again, it's going to be a question of term, and it'd be a question of money. There's always that Maple Leaf tax that you have to pay. The Leafs have to pay more than anybody else because they're the Leafs. David Kampf, Keefe trusts him as a checking third line, fourth line center. I could see him coming back, but it all depends on what he is asking for. If it's similar to what he earned the last 2 years, which is $1.5 million, I think they'd sign up for that. If he's looking for more than that, then I think they'll go in a different direction.
Is Treliving more of a bean counter right now, an outside the box thinker, or does he have both?
He has to be a bean counter because he doesn't have a lot of cap space. That'll change a little bit if they do what I expect them to do over the next week or so, and that's buy out the final year of Matt Murray. Although, there is the possibility they could find a team that wants Matt Murray for 1 year to fill their goaltending hole as a 1B or a backup, and needs the cap space to get to the cap floor. But that would probably mean trading a draft pick to get them to take that, and that's when the cap hit is as minuscule as it is for Murray in year one, which I think is $687,000. Just buy him out. If you're not going to bring him back and you're going to go with Samsonov and Wall, or you're going to trade for another goaltender, then it doesn't make sense to keep that money on the books. And if you can open up $4 million in cap space with one transaction, I think that that's something that eventually happens. But I think right now he can't afford to not be a bean counter because they don't have a lot of cap space.
Yeah, and why is that?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's, I mean, right. Okay. And the thing is, it's like, I mean, I see, like, in retrospect, people attacking Dubas for, again, nobody could read the land. Yeah, yeah. Okay. In 2019, tell me we're going to have a global pandemic that's going to leave this league in limbo in terms of revenue for 2 to 3
Yeah.
years. I would have said you're clueless. Well, it happened.
Right.
And that was a reality. And when he signed all those players to contracts, they thought the cap in 2021 was going to be $90 million. It's not going to get to $90 million until 2024 or 2025. So
Well,
that's where you can't criticize Dubas. Nobody could have read that landscape.
so uh, Nylander, Matthews, Marner, all homegrown, all drafted by the organization. You tack on Suarez. Back in those days, OG's converts admit it. We were all thinking this team is going to destroy the world. These four, it doesn't matter who you compliment them with. You just give them a decent goaltender to stop pucks. We're taking down this league. All these years later, man, they've accomplished a ton of stuff. A lot of historical regular seasons, a lot of personal accolades, one playoff round win.
Yeah.
So, in hindsight is 2020, Mike. Back in the day, we thought this was going to work. The question now is, how does it work for the Leafs in terms of unwinding some of this, extricating some of this, removing a part of this to open up new opportunities. Michael McLaughlin, and again, I don't, this is a prevailing, ongoing question. Is it Nylander or Marner? Does Mike Augello want the Leafs to keep Marner? What about Nylander? Michael Matthews on his boat or wherever he is right now, I mean, living the high life, advocating for a Marner trade because Nylander's the perfectly suited to be Auston Matthews 1A. Where does this end up, Mike?
Well, I mean, unless Brad Treliving has been working feverishly on a Marner trade, it's not going to happen because he has a no-move clause that kicks in on July 1st. It could happen. You never know. I mean, he may talk to people at the draft and go that direction, but it seems to me like they're keeping Marner. They have no choice but to keep Tavares. They're signing Matthews, and the one that's up in the air is Nylander. And the chatter out there is, well, they'd like to keep Nylander, but it's all going to matter about what he wants on his new deal. And if he wants, Mikko Rantanen, $9.5 million, he's not going to be in Toronto. If he's willing to take, 8 something, like with Philip Forsberg got from Nashville, then it's possible. But this is Nylander, and they, and I think this is the biggest factor here. Louis Gross, who is Nylander's agent, along with his dad, who's part of that agency, are the same agents that Johnny Gaudreau had in Calgary, and they negotiated and negotiated and negotiated, and then in the end, he walked and went to Columbus, and they got nothing for him. Once bitten, twice shy, baby.
Right.
It's just not, okay. We want you, but we want you at a certain price. And if you won't commit to that, okay, then now he has a 10-team no trade that kicks in on July 1st. You can work with 21 teams. There'll be a lot of people out there who would be interested in a 40-goal scoring William Nylander. I think they need to find out one way or the other whether he wants to stay and whether he'll sign a deal. And if they can't get a determination on that in the next few weeks before July 1st, then during the summer, I think he has to be traded.
Regardless, whether you sign him, you're putting a ton of money to these 4 guys still.
Yes.
And the question now is the shoreline becomes in sight in terms of the end of some of these contracts and the opportunities to remove them from the payroll. Is, do we want to continue down the road with these guys the way this is? Do we need this much firepower to continue on? And if Nylander's taking a bit of a discount to stay in Toronto, how much money does that still free up? Not a lot. So do you want to supplant him with another player of his ilk, offers other things, right? T-Sack, almost everyone who knows anything about hockey was predicting this cap issue. It's not in retrospect. We were saying this 5 minutes after the contracts were signed, but T-Sack, who would have given a fuck if the Leafs had won cups? They haven't. That's the thing, right? I mean, again, you talk about how much you know about hockey. We all
Yeah,
say, but what I'm saying to you is when they built this super team, you know there were going to be ramifications down the line. But the expectation is there would be success, and we would all give our right foot for a couple of cups, and then if the team's in disarray after, you can live off those cups. And I think that might have been the scenario that a lot of people were painting for themselves.
well, no, I think the thing that TSAC is missing here, Norm, is the fact that, okay, when they signed these 4 guys within the span of a year, $40 million, that was half the cap. Okay. They expected, and it was reasonable, and there were projections that, with the new TV deal and this and that the cap was going to go up to $90 million. So with that extra,
they didn't know, they were still running the risk.
Right. But there was no way to predict a global pandemic doing what it did to the finances of the league. And with that extra $10 million, okay, you could have re-signed Zach Hyman. You could have re-signed, if you wanted to, Freddie Anderson. You could have kept players around that you had to let go. That's
we aren't the only team in this predicament.
No. But a team like Tampa that won 2 Stanley Cups had the benefit of the Florida state tax and players who would take less to stay there because, if Steven Stamkos had to come to Toronto and made $11 million in pocket, it would have been the same as he's making $8.5 million in Florida. So that's a disadvantage for a number of teams, but those no tax teams have that advantage. So, okay, it's retrospect, it's 2020, reanalysis. There's sort of no point arguing about it, but I just look in the here and the now, and the cap is only going up $1 million next year, next season, and then it may go up significantly in 2024. The problem is that it's not how much you're paying for players. It's where those 4 players play. You need to reallocate, and I've said this for 3 years, Norm. You need to reallocate funds. You're spending $7.5 million on Morgan Riley, and that's what money well spent. But you needed to spend money on a defenseman, on a couple defensemen, and they're spending it on 4 forwards. And if you look at the teams that had success in the playoffs, Dallas, Carolina, Vegas, Florida to a lesser extent, what do they all have in common? Their defenses were ridiculous. And
the players were paying a bunch in taxes. So that's the thing, right? When we talk about, if Nylander takes a certain amount of money, we'll probably be good. But it really doesn't matter what kind of money he wants or will take. Aren't we wanting this core 4 to be dismantled and supplanted with players of the same capability, but who do different things in different parts of the ice? And you have this opportunity with William Nylander right now. God bless the man. He has his faction. Remember, his devotees, the Nylanderites, and it's going to hurt if he is removed from this group. But what you will get back, you'd hope, will do the same kinds of things that William Nylander did, but in a different way, where the Leafs, there's still a lot to be desired.
And that's the key.
You have this opportunity now.
Yeah, that's the key. The key is, it's like I have people on social media, and you hate Nylander, you just want him traded for whatever, a bag of pucks. No, you don't understand. They can't afford to pay him what he probably wants to be paid next year. So it's a question of shit or get off the pot. It's either sign him, and if you can or you trade him now when he's still under contract and you can still get value for him. And there are a whole slew of players out there are in the same boat that are entering the final year of their contract. Carolina doesn't have any problem trading Brett Pesce if Brett Pesce won't agree to a long-term extension. The same thing for all these guys in Calgary. The same thing for all these guys in Winnipeg. What makes William Nylander so special because he's in Toronto?
Right. Again, it depends on where you are in your fandom, Mike. if you're in at a point where it's just about the players and idolizing them and worshiping them and wanting to be like them, and in its social media age, just falling in love with these guys individually, you can't see the forest through the trees. It's a matter of loving a particular player and coming to their rescue or aid in a social media interaction. If somebody has an issue with the way that person plays, or thinks that that particular player is would be better served elsewhere in terms of what they can offer in exchange for a player like them who would do something on a different part of the ice. It's tough. Where I'm at is I just want to see some change, not just for the sake of change, but I believe change is necessary, especially after what took place a month and a bit ago, in terms of how the season concluded and where we are in terms of the run of this group, right? T-Sack, and we'll get out of here. Remember the Burns era, a handful of skill guys and the rest are cavemen. That's how you win in the playoffs. You could make that argument, but the Leafs were never designed that way, and to go all in with that kind of philosophy, I mean, it does take some tinkering, and that's where you've got to remove guys like William Nylander and bring back somebody else with a little bit more grit but offers the same skill level, especially on defense. Mike, I'll leave the last word to you, and then we'll get out of here.
It's a combination. It's you have to have skill, but you also have to have size and snarl and do it. All these things. You can't have a one-dimensional team, and that's the problem. I think this team now, this playoff, they were the least one-dimensional they've been in most recent years. They won a round, but they were very one-dimensional the last few years, and they bowed out early. Great regular season team, couldn't do anything in the playoffs. You have to be multi-dimensional to win in the playoffs. Vegas proved that. Florida proved that. And a lot of the other teams that had some success in the playoffs proved that. And unless they do that, this is just going to happen over and over again.
Interesting times ahead, my friend. July 1st is coming, and it's coming quick. What will the Maple Leafs do between now and then? It remains to be seen, and Mike and I will certainly be here for the follow whenever there is big news. In the meantime, hockeybuzz.com is where you can read all of Mike's stuff. Keefe extension imminent, ? Schenn, Leafs apart on contract talks. Mike, I know you'll have more content for us through that medium. And you know where you can find me, guys, at Norman Oak Ridge Ford on Instagram. If you're looking for a car, Oak Ridge Ford is your place. Pre-owned, new, financing, leasing. I will get it done for you. Hey, and you can see on the community portion of the Leafs Convo channel on YouTube, I am the salesperson of the month. I don't know how the hell that worked out. I'm the bum of the month generally, but I'm also the salesperson of the month. So I may have a little bit of leverage to help you get a deal on another car. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. We have another convo on the way very soon. Happy Father's Day, everybody. Mike, have a great day, my friend. For Mr. A, I'm Norm.